Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and this is another installment in my Inspired Tarot Map series. And this time I'm hosting Carmen Sorrenti. Hi Carmen.
Hi.
And Carmen is the creatrix of the Polarcos Tarot and an amazing artist. And I'm just so excited, Carmen, to have you over and to just get to know you in person. You know, you really inspired me when I watched your interview with Wasima, which I'm going to link below as well. There's also a course of yours happening, Tarot and Dreams, which I'm also going to link below for you guys to check it out. And yeah, I'm really excited to host you because, you know, I'm inviting people who inspire me and you're one of them.
Thank you. I feel really enlivened by this because the Polarcos sometimes are just pushing at the cave saying, come on, say something, speak, you know.
Yeah. And for people who have no idea and go, why the fuck did she name the tarot deck like this? What does it mean? I don't understand this word. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Can you tell us about Polarcos? Like, what is it and how come this name, like, you know, was probably as important for you to appear as the name of your deck? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Of course. And as far as I imagine, you do pronounce it Polarcos. But I'm not even sure about that. And I love already how this opens a mystery. I love the sound of the word. To me, it's a kind of bird that flies in with inspiration. Volare, folarco. It just has this sense. Then, of course, according to Peter Kingsley, the word is associated to these caves where people would go millennia ago, you know, before the dream temples, to incubate dreams for the community. I don't want to go into too much detail about that because there's a wealth of material on that. But what I will say, in addition to that, is in any case, I think as a symbolic meaning for the deck that's really significant, because there's something about this deck, and I myself didn't start out saying, I want to make a deck about this and this and this. I allowed it to come to me. So already it was a cave. And something you said about the Hermit card, about the Hermit, that goes back to the back of the deck. So this shapeshifter matrix card. Yep.
we covered both sides.
We're working in great sync here. It's like a double act. So when you mentioned that, exactly, that it was like a part of it was like a cave, so I love that. And yes, there's something about being able to, from this incarnation, go into that cave and access the much vaster mystery. So Polarcos in that sense really resonates. And I would like to say about that again with the shapeshifter card, which is the back of the deck. So you see how the snake starts with a spiral. Yeah, so I'll put it up, which then releases up into solar plexus, the gold, the identity, the heart, and goes all the way up into the brow, which would be the third eye and the constellations. So the reason that the suit of spirals or earth pentacles is called spirals is very much because of this, because of the incarnation starting in the sort of belly of the matrix of the goddess as a spiral. And then through many traditions, you know, we incarnate into the world through the spiral. So if you think even just of our DNA, or if you think of all the natural forms of spirals, all the nature forms, you know, the shells and in flowers, and it goes on and on and on. There's so much work on the spiral. So this idea that we spiral in, and therefore that earth suit called spirals, but we spiral in, but that whole time that we are here in this body, somehow the potency and the eros connects us back through our heart into the cosmos and into our larger reality. So in this deck and in this idea of working with the dreaming and with the cave, the cave, which again is the womb, and the spiral. Once again, it's about remembering those two things, you know, being here now and yet being connected to the whole.
Yeah, I'm just going to, I'm sorry. I think Facebook is not necessary right now. This is no, but this is beautiful, and I wanted to actually, because I forgot, I wanted to ask you about your heritage, and I think that would tie in really beautifully with what you were saying about Folarcos, about the caves, about, you know, the dreaming, and how the deep mama womb kind of, you know, kind of encapsulates us, and then like spukes us out basically in the spiraling motion. Because from what I read on your website, you lived near Positano or in Positano in Italy, in southern Italy. Were you born there? Can you tell us a little bit about the ancestry? And because that's, I think, very nicely kind of goes, like you can see it in this deck.
So I was born in Positano to an Australian mother who, a little bit like Vali, escaped Australia at a time where maybe Australia didn't speak to them in the way that it did later. They both went back somehow, you know, but they needed to you know, to journey out, and they met in Positano in that time. And Positano at the time was really a bohemian center. You know, 60s, 70s, Positano was a sort of cauldron of artists and people from all over the world that would come. They thought they were just passing through, and they would stay sometimes months, sometimes years, and really from all over the world. I mean, I was brought up by people, you know, one of them was a Sufi scholar, one of them was a German writer, one of them was a Hungarian painter, one of them, and it goes on and on and on and on. So I was hearing all these different languages, learning from all these different, you know, unconsciously, obviously, as a small child, learning from all these different traditions, and yet bringing them back into this land that in itself was very strong, even though I didn't know the myths of my own land at the time, because of course I was brought up by foreigners to that land. My own father, who was from that area, was actually everywhere else. You know, he was in America and he was in, you know, so there was this sense of, again, of spreading the network, and yet being tied to a land that was full of the volcanoes, the Greek traditions, the Greek myths. I mean, just up the road from Positano in Naples is that, apart from the Vesuvius and across is, you know, Sicily and with Mount Etna. But one of the myths that people don't know about the land, which is one of the most striking as far as I'm concerned, is that in Naples is what is called a supervolcano. So what is Campi Flegrei, and it's flat land with lakes on top, but underneath in the earth are a series of volcanoes that, if they ever go off, and they go off very much more rarely than the usual volcanoes we're used to, where it's a mountain with a crater, you know, these are underground. And if they go off, it changes the entire geology for the next few billion years or whatever. I'm not very good with math, but, you know, for really much more striking amounts of time. And the world as we know it completely changes. So Campi Flegrei obviously has not been active, but potentially it is. And it's where Aeneid set, where Virgil set Aeneid going down into the underworld. So Hecate's sacred grove was there by that lake. It's now sort of, you know, the buildings all around this incredibly potent place that could, in theory, go off at any moment.
But even knowing, you know, this, the knowledge even that is something underneath the ground, you know, that it's like this potency, that's even symbolically, when you think of it, that's amazing for the power of the place.
It became the entrance to the underworld. I mean, that was in the Aeneid, that is where it was set.
Yeah.
You know, actually being able to go in and under was right there. And then south of Positano is Velia, where Parmenides lived, who was considered one of the Folarcos, at least according to pedestal from a statue of his. So it was rich, rich, rich with myth for, you know, centuries, and even before that, who knows. So there was this mix of needing to, in a way, reconnect to the land, and at the same time explore and travel nomadically, which we did my whole childhood, and on and on and on, and I'm still somewhat of a nomad. Um,
So can I ask you, like, sorry, I interrupt. So you
yeah,
were there as a child, and then you were just kind of moving with your family and with the whole artistic, you're like very bohemian in this sense, like very artistic, kind of not very
yeah,
like a regular lifestyle, I imagine. So when you're
yes.
moving like a lot during your life?
Well, as a child, we were based in Positano, but we were constantly, my mom would just take me out of school for a few months, which at the time there in that place was absolutely fine. And we would go traveling and we would go and visit some of these bohemian friends that were scattered around the world, and we would go and live with them for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Most of them were artists or somehow incredibly creative people, quite crazy people, of course. I mean, it's they're tapping into something which is more than the regimented life which we try to create, with its problems and its glories, of course. And I mean, I was dressing up in drag when I was 6 years old, because a lot of the men that were surrogate fathers to me were, dressing up as women. And one day when I was 6, and I would dress up in their women clothes too, and realize that nobody was laughing. And I thought, well, something's not quite right. And I would ask them, why? And I would take on their accent. So this was János, Hungarian artist, who was another one of the guardians of the deck. There are two guardians of the deck, Vali and János. And I said to him, why they don't laugh at me? Why they only laugh at you? And I didn't even realize I was taking on his accent. It was just natural to me because I lived with him, and he's the person who taught me to draw. Like, he would just draw and I would imitate him. And he looked at me and he said, because I am a man and I dress as a woman. And I went, oh. And so I took his usual everyday male clothes, and everyone was on the floor laughing at me. And I'm 6 and I'm thinking, okay, But so, when alchemy came in much later, and the idea of the union of opposites and the male and female and the hermaphrodite, somewhere there was an echo of this, which was already in a very different way part of my life. So I was thirsty for it.
Yeah, wow, that's really fascinating. So as we were talking before I pressed recording, I couldn't believe that nobody mentioned, watching all these numerous reviews of your deck, nobody mentioned that there's Vali Myers in your deck. And Vali is one of my favorite ever artists. I just show people how she looked. She tattooed herself. She was just like an amazing, free-spirited artist from Australia. But she spent a lot of time in Positano and living in like this amazing, I don't even know if I can find it here, this amazing valley with Valley in Valley.
Yeah.
I'm just
Valley in the valley. Yes.
Yes, Valley in the Valley. I don't know if I can find it now. I can't see it. Doesn't matter. But tell me, because you met her, right? You actually met Vali Myers.
What with Vali? I mean, she was there for decades. And when I was a child, she lived there full time. I mean, she would travel to exhibits and, she would, of course, she traveled. But basically, that is the time that she lived there. So she was really part of that close-knit community of artists with which I lived. And to me, she was always, even more than I realized as a child, of course, an absolutely fundamental figure. Yeah.
Just show a few of her paintings for people who don't know. Yeah.
She really was, she carried this archetype of the wild woman so strongly and so boldly and in such an extraordinary way. And I have these striking memories of her when I was, quite small, and everything is sort of new, where she would just, coming down from the valley, there wasn't a road. They had to literally climb down through dirt pathways in the middle of the rocks with no lights. She had no phone, no electricity, the house she lived in, call it a house, it was a minute kind of 10 square meters, domed, because Saracen influence there, domed, tiny, beautiful, enchanted place, but really tiny. And she hung a huge cage in there, and she would paint suspended. Yes, there it is. There it is.
And that's the valley, right?
Valley. Yes. So she would come down with this, this red hair, which of course she never combed, was this kind of mane. It was like fire. It was like this woman walking in fire, really. And this was before tattoos became the norm. Everyone's all tattooed now. And this was not the norm, especially in a fishing village in southern Italy. And she would walk down with these layers of colored skirts. And I remember one night I was standing with her, because, I would be up with the adults, even through the night, of course, as a tiny kid. And I was walking with her for some reason on the street, and she had to pee. So I'm like, oh God, where are we going to go? And she just stopped in the road, and she just stood there, legs wide, in her skirts, and she just peed.
I have to say, my great-grandmother, she used to do that too in the villages. Like, that's what she did. We looked at it like children, at her like this, and she just like spread her legs exactly like that.
And why not?
Were you surprised as a child, or you were like, oh, do you remember?
I was so fascinated. Everything she did was something that somehow I just pulled in and put somewhere. As a child, you don't know where you're putting things, but it was just, it really was food. And once, because, she lived with wild animals, as I'm sure you know, and the foxes, she would sleep with them. They would do this with her. And once, and I don't know why she did this, because again, as a child, you don't necessarily ask the right questions. She gave me a foxtail of one of her dead foxes. So I didn't ask the history, I didn't ask what fox it was or whatever. And to this day, I sometimes think, my God, why did she give me one of her foxtails? It feels so, such an incredible, in a way, legacy to have this foxtail. And one time when she finally went back to Australia, many years later, we visited her, my mother and I. We were over in Australia on one of my rare trips, and we went to see her studio. And I said to her, Vali, and it would be, she painted it all pink, and she put flowers all over it. It was an amazing place. Again, she just made this kind of magic atmosphere. And she had a dingo in there, not a dog, a dingo. And I'm like, oh, you continue your tradition. Yeah, for her it was normal, of course, And I said to her, don't you miss any of the old alleyways in Europe and the kind of, that kind of old, and she looked at me and she said, I was sick of the alleyways. I'd had enough of them. And I accompanied her to the bank, which was a rare occasion. First, we went to get dog food for the dingo, and then we go into the bank, and she turns to me and she looks at me, she said, I have to finally get a credit card. She'd never had a credit card. I mean, she was getting on, this was, and we were in the bank, and this was for her, this novel experience of finally having a credit card. And she was looking at them all really suspiciously, So, and there's something about her in the world we live in today, of course, apart from her extraordinary art. I mean, that just goes without saying, but just the way she lived and her ferocious, sort of respect for her own instinctual life and her sense of being really part of this world in a very passionate way, and living in that kind of sense of really the wildness in all its facets is something today we really need to hold close. We're really.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that you met her. So would you say that she influenced in some way your art, or more just you as a person, like your life, or both, or how would you?
I mean, consciously, I would say me as a person. Of course, we don't know everything that goes on, of course. Me as a person, what I do artistically, I would say that it's so. I go into a space of being in such an altered state of consciousness that I don't even know where that comes from. I couldn't say, but sometimes someone says to me, oh, your work really looks like blah, blah, or blah, blah, or blah, blah. Often it's people I haven't even heard of. and it's fine. And sometimes there are people that when I go and look at, I I love their work, or sometimes not, but it's almost, it's just, yes, maybe we've been bringing in stuff from the same place. Who knows.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's not even that to say that, you kind of, that your art is in some way similar to Vali, but I think like maybe in a way when you were influenced so much as a person when you were so young to meet this wild spirit who knows how that filtered, as you said, like we don't know these things. So, but it's such an amazing story. I just couldn't believe when you said, when we were writing, that you knew her and she gifted you a foxtail. She was known as a fox lady, right? She loved foxes, like as you said, like, and they so untrustworthy animals, like dingoes actually, or other, like, they don't come to humans unless they Aboriginal people from Australia. They used to sleep with dingoes, apparently, I've heard. But yeah, she was amazing like this. So anyway, thank you for sharing these stories.
It's such a pleasure to talk about her and to have her somehow acknowledged in the deck,
And actually, the last question: why did you choose 7 of Spirals to put her on? Was it a special? I mean, 7 of Wands, it would be, right, in like 7 of Fire, in like if we translated the regular tarot deck, right?
It would be Earth.
Oh no, 7 of Earth. Oh, that's right, Spiral and the yes.
To be honest with you, I don't know why. Like, I did it first.
Okay.
What I could reflect in is one part of it is simply a little bit what it says in the card, in the text, about really listening. She has a toad in her hand, and there's something about really listening in to nature. And I read this wonderful apparently fact about toads, that when there's an earthquake coming, they know at least 5 days before and they leave.
So early, 5 days,
something like that. And so there's this thing about really, again, listening in. How connected are you? So see how her tree, her hair is becoming the tree, or the tree, the axis mundi, the kind of spirit of the world is becoming her. So there's this thing of realizing you're absolutely part of that greater earth and Earth Mother.
Totally. She would fit 7 of Wands as well, but I actually love her as 7 of Pentacles. That fits because she had also that amazing groundedness and connection to nature that I don't think I've seen in any human living, in the regular world, traveling and selling her art and being in New York and being the famous person as well.
Yeah.
How wild she was as a person. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just maybe move back to Folarcos Tarot, because it's very dreamy. It was inspired by the dreams, and as we discussed before, this Folarcos being like the kind of priests for dreams, or deciphering, or maybe dreaming for you, or deciphering your dreams, or helping you figure out what the dream messages are. So how come all of this kind of Folarcos, like, dreamy layer, how did it connect to tarot for you? Like, did you always love tarot? Like, you wanted to put it into the cards? Like, how come you made the tarot deck out of all these visions?
Again, it kept coming in. So tarot was always there. As a child, of course, it kept coming up, and my birth was predicted with tarot, and there are loads of stories around the tarot. And my mother taking me to tarot readers all over the world, wherever we went, there was a tarot reader that she fell in love with, So, but then I had to come back to it much later on my own, in a very, in quite a different way, because I was getting into it myself directly and not having other people do it for me, So, and at first it felt like, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, this is what, because, you're a child taken around by your mom, and they're tarot readers, he's sort of this other kind of race or something, and what are they going to say, exactly. yeah, you know, exactly right. You know, and as a child, you're going, oh, you know. Um, so when I was in London, what feels like several lifetimes ago as an actress, and you know, of course, I was drawn back to it, and I started to explore it somewhat, and then I started to work with the Jodorowskis here in Italy, both Alejandro and his son Cristobal, and of course they use the cards a lot. And I did several, you know, I wouldn't know what you even call them in English, the sort of atti psychoshamanici, so you know, psycho-shamanistic acts that they prescribe.
Psychomagic, I think he calls it, right? Like the
Yeah,
psychomagical acts. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So from what the cards say, you do, you know, you do these, you enact these kind of very mythological, and again, something that is usually very strongly tied to your ancestors. So that brought in a whole other layer, and it was working quite directly with the cards. But again, it was then taken, and you had to focus on the acts that you were doing. And I was still saying, wait a minute, I need more direct contact. I need more direct contact. And I worked with holotropic breath work for a long time. So again, bringing in those other layers. And at a certain point, all of this, you know, so the dreaming was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And at a certain point, these two just had to merge. I'm like, okay, well, I kept putting aside the idea of making a deck because it seemed like an odyssey, really. Except it kept coming back. So one year I just said, okay, at the beginning of the year, 2014, I said, fine, I will do this. Actually, you do this. I'm available. And of course, if you start that way, you're then going to have a lot of, you know, starts and stops. And it did at first. I really wasn't in very high seas. But over time, the dialogue developed, and this kind of incredible journey of creating relationship. So with these various systems and bringing them in together.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, because you know, tarot is such a structured system. Was it difficult to, you know, kind of put the dreams, the kind of this dreamy world which doesn't have too many structures, into the some form of a structure? Did you find it difficult, or was it actually helpful maybe?
Well, I had bridges because I studied astrology quite in depth with Liz Green's school, and I worked for quite a long time. I mean, I still use it, but with the Mythic Tarot, Juliet Schellenberg and Liz Green, which again merges those worlds quite a lot, and merges the mythological world, of course, because they use myths for each suit. And so again, so a third symbolic system, right? And while I was doing that, I studied, you know, in depth the kind of Western mystery traditions and the whole history of tarot, history of astrology. And so bringing in, you know, you really had to use, well, I had to use several different optics in a way, and mesh them all together. So for a while, yeah, it was a kind of really chaotic. Talk about temperance. Talk about having to bring things together, you know, and find a way. Yeah, you know, talk about that kind of magma of all the colors of the universe being remixed and finding new harmonies somehow, you know. So that did, of course, it took a lot of exploration and a lot of time. But I suppose what I had on my side, for my dramatic temperament, saying every so often, "That's it, I'm quitting," you know, I'm walking out. Then yeah, never again. But then this kind of the other side would come in of this deep trust, this kind of very Jupiterian, you know, lots of planet in Sag, saying, no, there is design in this and there is purpose, and I just have to trust it. Just keep at it. And that's really what got me through. Yeah, yeah.
So what's your
Yeah.
sun, moon, and ascendant then? Can we?
Ah! So my sun is Virgo, which most people don't see, but in fact not only grounds me, but it's actually what made me need to paint and to come in to, the physical reality, talk about the spirals, so finding a way to ground the intuition was the only way for me to accept sort of, physical life. I'm like, okay, fine, that sounds like a good compromise.
And very
So that's very
virginal,
interesting.
virginal kind of, like Virgo to me has such bad rap in astrology, but they actually signs that's so strongly connected to the earth and to healing arts and to the goddess and to the spiral.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And making it work here and now, all of this.
Yeah.
Can you make it work here,
Yeah.
So that's been a big lesson. Moon Sag and Ascendant Gemini. So talk about, running around looking for all those systems and, finding common threads.
Wow. How wonderful that the moon is in Sag and like how it fits your mother also somehow, how we have this connection to the moon, to this like traveler and bohemian and yeah, wonderful. Yeah. I love the moon in Sag. These are like, I have my best mate has a moon in Sag. It's awesome to see. I'm a Sagittarius myself, so I'm kind of really connecting. But when somebody has a moon in Sag, it's even somehow I feel more potent because it's so instinctual than the sun in Sag. Somehow it's different energy. And somehow I feel like she's much more optimistic than I am, being a Sag myself and having, a lot of planets in Sagittarius as well. But the moon in Sag is something special. So it's awesome to know. Cool.
And it works well with you, doesn't it? Sun-moon connection. So there's a wonderful dance there. And how about your moon? Where's your moon?
I have moon in Libra and Leo ascendant. So yeah, I don't have any earth in my chart. South node in Taurus in the 10th. So that will do. But other than that, air, fire, Uranus, water, that's it. I'm busted, like air and fire combustion. But I think, I have this theory because I also, I've been studying astrology since 2005 in depth as well. I'm an astrologer, I work with astrology. And to me, I think what we don't have, we kind of don't need to have this lifetime. And because I do have, let's say, or whoever has so many other, elements represented. It's not that I'm such a great Sagittarian or I'm dealing so great with fire. This is like my fucking lesson, like, hello, do it. Like, how can you learn how to actually balance those elements? And these are the elements that are important for you this lifetime, because that's what, it's mega featured in your chart this time. So yeah,
there's a real story, isn't there, around what's featured? There's a real story around what you're doing with it. There's a real strong, and I find often the missing elements actually are quite strong in you. It's just that they kind of come in and go,
I agree. Yeah, so I think in the beginning I was thinking, I don't have water or earth, like I've got to work on those. But I noticed, like with South Node, even in earth, like it's really kind of, and people often think I have a lot of earth. I'm thinking, you know me nothing. Don't know. I don't know. But, on the other hand, I was just thinking that actually this theory, when I started like kind of watching my friends and people I know, and because it's mostly you can check it on people but yeah, it's really interesting that actually what you have, it's what you like work with that, don't worry about what you don't have. I mean, you can of course note what's missing, because that's often an important kind of info. But I realized that's what I don't have, but what I have I can work with, and maybe with this I can balance what I don't have in my chart, but not the other way around, that I'm kind of like searching for water, but there's all this fire and air that is like driving me crazy. It's like, no. Work with your thoughts. Yeah.
I think anyway, when the water really wants your attention, it will get your attention, and then you say, okay, well, okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So yeah, I'm so excited also that you're an astrologer. We could talk, but yeah, we're going to move on with our interview because people will be going like, yeah, astrologers and and astrology talk. But I wanted to ask you about a few cards from Polarcos deck itself. Um, should I start with this? Actually, maybe I start with, no, let's start with the majors. Because the deck, and whoever doesn't know Polarcos Tarot, I did a review of the deck, and you can guys see it, and we'll link it below as well. Because Carmen, you kind of introduced a structure of some sort in the structure already. So we have all these majors that are this amazing, you know, full on, like, are they oil paintings or are they water?
Mainly they're, yeah, yeah.
So we have these paintings, then we have the minors, which from what I read, you kind of let your inner child explore it and just do whatever she wants. So you wanted a different kind of world, and they are in a totally different, you know, they feel differently to the majors. And then you have that the aces that, you know, also are like so unusual. And then you have the, you know, the code cards also with these trails, which you call the knights, which somehow I feel like, you know, they must be connected to the aces, because why are they all black and white, which I'm going to ask you. And there's also this interesting connection between aces, which all have, you know, closed eyes and kind of black and white, and the tens of each of the suits, which all have open eyes and full on like kind of colorful expression. So when I saw this deck, I was just going like, what the fuck? I want it now. I want to deliver it, and I don't want to wait for it. And I was lucky enough for one of my really amazing friends, Victoria, to gift it to me. So when it came, I was like emerged. Like, I love this deck so much, Carmen. So let's start with this majors. Like, I picked 4. One of my, so this is Temperance, which to me is by Golden Dawn. This is a Sagittarian card. And this is the card that I mean, I love Temperance, you know, and I have to say it like this. I don't really understand it very well. Like, I can theorize about it, but it's not something that really, and yours one was like, I was going like, what is this? How is this a Temperance? So can you tell me, how is this a Temperance?
So, I'll start by saying, and just as not as an aside, but it will come in then, is that the deck also has a heavy alchemical influence, right? And that'll come in a moment, so I'll put that aside for a moment. And in several of the majors, you will notice this kind of feminine divinity figure. So she's in the World too at the top, the pregnant woman. She's in the Death card, and there's a sort of similar face. She's actually in the back of the card too, somehow. There's a similar kind of quality of this feminine matrix. And she comes in various guises. Yep. And there she has the feathers, and anyway. Yeah. I'll stick with this card, otherwise I'll keep digressing, which I do easily. So here, again, she has the gold on top and the spirals around her. So again, something that is somehow very ordered for manifestation. And yet, within that, she is working with all the colors of the cosmos, the chaos, shall we say, when it's warring, you know, when all the elements are kind of colliding, and there isn't any pattern yet, or any sort of specific shapes that you can see that somehow are relating to each other. And she's somehow finding those new harmonies, which is referred to again in the text about consciousness changing perspective. So that again, in relationship, there can be new ways, and this is where the alchemy comes in, new ways of opposites and contrasts, and maybe even difficulties in relationship, to find new ways of meeting and new ways of communicating.
Beautiful. So this face, because I think she took me also like, why is she like, because she feels like she doesn't belong there, or she's like a totally, or like a mask, or like she's from another world. you know.
Well, yes, he is from another world. I mean, it's heavily archetypal, isn't it? If you're considering we're personifying an energy which is the matrix of the cosmos, you know.
Good
So
luck. Just take this.
you know, a little like, oh.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing with the majors, this idea of them being heavily archetypal as opposed to the minors, and being reminded the whole time that we're dealing with different worlds, daily life, the dream world, even further back than your accessible dream world, therefore the black and white cards. So there's sort of, it's really, it kind of structures the idea and reminds you experientially, because you're seeing it so strongly, of various realms of reality, various dimensions.
That's pretty amazing. So the next card I wanted to ask is the Justice. This is, again, you gave it 8. Sometimes we know that Justice can be 11th. And of course, I'm an 8 number, so I never know if I'm the Justice or if I'm the Strength. I love Justice as 8 as well, because I love traditional Marseille system, and yeah, that's what I stick to. So I'm happy to see Justice as an 8. And again, I don't know if people will see, but this yeah, like this kind of bird cage, like bony. I don't know if it's alive or not, or half alive, half dead. There is this strange figure sticking out here. Carmen.
Yeah. Again, first thing I would like to say is when specifically, I mean, I think any time that we use images, but specifically in this deck, whatever it brings up for you is valid, whether it's what I as an artist made or not. There's so many layers that I'm not even aware of. And it's, you know, again, it's going back to that mundus imaginalis, that imagine a world that has a reality of its own, whether I know what's coming in or not.
Oh,
right?
Such an important point. Thank you for mentioning it.
Right? So even if I give my backstory, it's only part of it, of course, you know. And my backstory for this card is that, so there's a circus atmosphere. The figure on the trapeze in the background has this bulging heart, right? So she is meditating, and she's been lit up by her meditation. She's meditating on the mechanical raven. By mechanical, I don't mean that in any way pejoratively. I mean a raven that is handmade, like you. I actually saw this image in Cirque du Soleil once many years ago, and it so struck me. It was an enormous raven that was floating in the sky, but it was all made from bits of metal, and you know, and it just had such an impact for me. This thing again of what creativity can do and how it can remind us of, you know, flight and birds and all kinds of other, you know, other with a capital O. And yet we do it with our own creativity. We connect through that. So because she is Justice, and again, it could tie into also the goddess Mat weighing the feathers. So there's this thing of, as Justice, can you really create a system which is fair and balanced and very true to your own process of thinking? Therefore, it's not just opinions. It's not just something that you've taken on through conditioning or through it's because what everybody says, or because, but actually creating in a way a system which is very true because you've really, really, really forged it in the fire in a sense. And therefore you're creating a justice that speaks to something that somehow hits some core of truth. And the raven is also looking towards that heart in the figure beyond. So somehow it connects to something, again, that has a beating, a live pulse, and is true in that sense.
That's beautiful. Oh, good. I see it much more now, because sometimes, you know, even when I read the book, like you keep forgetting, later on you look at it and you go again, like, so I think, as you said, but this is a really, really important point for everybody who listens to make, that especially with decks like this, when it's just this kind of liminal space and you're in between, whatever comes first, like listen to that, and then by all means go and explore what Karen wrote in the book or whatever we are talking about and others' ideas, because that also sometimes gives you this interesting twist to what we are thinking or feeling, because sometimes we too bogged down in our own, our vision often is limited, which is valid, but we can also go beyond that. So this justice is beautiful.
That's why in the booklet the descriptions are not keywords and they're not explanations, because I really want, or what seemed again to want to come through, was this possibility for people to go into that world themselves and explore it. So often, if we're given an explanation, we then don't go any further. We just say, oh, that's what it means, and we close it off. So yes, I am preparing a book and blah, 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 but I wanted to be far and separate from that original thing where people are just delving into delving, and going further and developing further.
And it is an amazing, actually, booklet. Like, I wish there was even more, of this kind of poetry or something, because there's, I don't know if you know this deck, Margaret Peterson Tarot.
No.
Margaret Peterson Tarot, and her booklet, it's like one of my ever favorite tarot books written, and she just, for each major arcana, she just wrote a poem, and it's like, and then the majors also, she just like just wrote this a little bit like you here, what also Ellen Lorenzi Prince does. They just like, they're just punches of inspiration, but they don't give you like, that's it. Like, it's just, and I like this because that's what you, I think, achieved in this booklet as well with the text, because it's more like dreamlike and inspirational, and that has a little bit of realistic elements, but it's all like mixed up with like the deck itself, which I think it's amazing. So let's move to Hierophant. This is one of my favorite cards ever, and this one is very unusual. Tell us, Carmen, about that.
So we have a centaur as the dominant figure, so half human and half animal. But in fact, there's a third element, which is the human part is almost all plants, right? So it's all green and it has plants kind of growing from her. So in a sense, it's an even more of a hybrid. And she has the two alchemical snakes uniting on her back. So one is going around her waist, one is coming down. So again, the body part, the spirit part, and they're coming together. And then above the fire in front of her, she is holding the phoenix who is dying, and the white phoenix who is being reborn is coming up through her body again. So again, through this process of, renewal, and of course she has also, well, of course, I mean, she has this heart, which is a rose, and the spiral in the back, which again, the manifestation, bringing in all the eggs. So there's a great deal of new life coming in from the various, a great sense of renewal coming in from various different points. So because it's a Hierophant, and I would like it to be going through the centuries and in a sense tracking all the various symbolic and religious systems that we have worked with and that we work with, and in some way, again, coming to something that is very alive in those, therefore meaningful to you, direct experience of that process of religiosity and sacredness and whatever you care to call it.
Wow, love it. Could be a card of Sagittarius too. It's half man, half horse. And Chiron, it's like amazing. So the last one is Magician, because this one lost me. I'm still, I can see the lunar, the solar, the mixing and the kind of magic happening, but I would love to hear your perspective.
So here we go back to the famous hermaphrodite, the male and female. So it's actually one figure. This is not two people. I mean, it can be two people, of course, as well. But while I was doing it, it was clear to me that it was like in the old alchemical etchings and drawings. You often see this figure of Mercurius that is overseeing the works, but is also the beginning of the goal, and is also the gold. It's a little bit everything. And he's this figure is got two heads, and it's male and female, because again, it's the opposites, and being able to bring in all the different aspects of yourself and therefore also of the world that seem to not be able to go together, and yet only when they do somehow all find space can you find that expansion that activates, you know, what the magician can do. So there's all that fire, and there's all the astrology on the table, and you've got the dragon of the sun, so the male and the female wolf, and all of that coming together, and you've got a little Mercury figure on his shoulder with the planets, and you've got all chemical operations here with a bird on the other side. So again, it's all these possibilities that once they are conscious and come together can activate consciousness in a way that is, you know, magical, or, you know, can then take action forward in the world.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
I mean, you know, these are images that, of course, if you're working especially with dreams, you might only pick up on one detail of the image.
Yeah.
But if you want to use them, even for traditional readings, of course, the structure remains the same. So there's an echo for each card that does pertain to the traditional structure.
Yeah. So let's move to the aces and trays. Why are they? I think I'm going to leave the aces and tens, because this is like the, you know, the beginning. You still kind of have, right? You kind of step into this opportunity, this world you envision, and then you kind of like manifest it, right, in the 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, very quickly, all the minors go through, they build to come to the 10. So in a way, it echoes the Kabbalah and the Sephirot, the tree of life, where you get the 1 is potential, and the 10 as the full manifestation and awareness, and you know.
Yeah. So why did you make, first of all, aces black and white?
So the paintings are actually in full color, so I specifically chose to then make them black and white for the deck, because to remind again that this 1 in potential goes back to the 1 of creation. So it's talk about a dimension that is all pervading, but at the same time very, 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 very distant, and can also be read sometimes in certain instances, depending on the situation, as dissociated elements, which is very important if you're doing trauma work. So if you're working with people that perhaps have cut off from certain instinctual realms, or from certain experiences of their lives that badly want to come back in, and we often do that, you know, to greater or lesser degrees, what is called in shamanism soul loss. Bits of yourself that have been somehow relegated to somewhere that is so far out in some other place that quite a lot of traveling needs to be done to bring it back. So in a way, right away you see that card, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that, because again, it can just pertain to something that still is, I mean, all the potential is there, it's incredibly strong, and yet it still somehow has to be brought in. How is it going to manifest specifically here and now? But it does give you a sense of a lot of distance traveled, and or you traveling, you know, quite far to go there. So, and especially if you're working with dreams, it will, it could be even speaking about visitations from other realms, or you actually traveling in your dreams, because that happens too, to other dimensions, other realms, other, you know, depending, I don't want to be too specific, because it just, then we'll open up too many specifics about, you know, where you go with your, it would be a whole other.
Yeah, sure. So would that somehow, because all the dreamers have closed eyes as well, and because aces are like, so dreamers are the pages, that's kind of like the, also the beginning, the aces are a little bit of the beginning, so that's why you chose to have closed eyes for the dreamers as well. I love how
something is finally coming in. Yeah, something is finally coming in, but it's still, it's the beginning, it's a seed, you know?
Yeah, totally cool. I love it. So the trails.
And so this makes the trails a really key card, okay? So trails take over the nights, right? The position of the nights. And a trail meaning the path. So literally, not only the path that you might follow, but literally when, you know, when in fairy tales, you like Hansel and Gretel, you throw breadcrumbs so that you find your way back, right? Along the trail. So it's, in a way, they are guides or psychopomps. If you want to talk about how far you're going, you might be going into the underworld, into a really deep journey for a reading, you know. And again, they can travel far out to the world of the aces. They can go really, really, really far. So that's why the moment they come in, you know, black and white, boom, this is a guide figure and this is something big, and you could be going quite far into some process, investigating something. And yet you have a guide that can and will not only know how to take you there, but bring you back.
Wow. So would you, for example, work with these cards also consciously? Like that you, for example, think, I need a guide, I really want to go, I don't know, let's say underworld, and I'm like, I would love this to be my guide, and I would pick it consciously? Or would you just like do it randomly, that you know, if they come up in the reading, you kind of know that you do have this opportunity to travel the realms? Would you work both ways?
I mean, of course you can play with it, of course, and you can call up that card, of course, if you feel you really need that. Yeah, you call on it, you have it there on your altar, and you're under your pillow, whatever. Sure. If you feel you're in need of that, you can call on it, sure.
And sometimes when it comes up, it's even a double whammy.
It's something to, as far as I'm concerned, something to really notice, and something that might be quite tricky in a sense. You know, maybe it's something that to come in is going to need a fair amount of work, or a fair amount of your focus. You know, it's sort of, it's like it underlines it somehow.
Mm. It's very they look very fascinating. And here, did it make any like, it looks like the two have kind of closed eyes, and it's the wings and the spirals, so the earth and air, right? Mm-hmm. And these two guys are kind of, I mean, two girls, two knights, two trails are kind of open, and like, did it, why?
I didn't specifically, for the trails, I didn't specifically have them as you know, open. It wasn't significant necessarily, though. Of course, when you pick it, it might be significant, you know, in that specific reading.
Yeah, but it's not that you planned it in any way.
No.
Cool. That's exciting. We will be finishing off with the minors then. So we know now, by now, I hope you guys also figured out the structure of how the worlds kind of mix, and how amazingly actually you thought that through. And this is like a like a dream structure in the tarot structure. I find it fascinating. So the minors, what I read on your website, you just said that you wanted your inner child to kind of go off and play, and you wanted to make them totally different. You didn't want those full color paintings and this kind of more, what would seem like maybe more not structured, but kind of finished outcome. Like, there's a painting, there's not much room for like adding shit to it. And here you definitely, you know, you can be playing. So tell us a little bit more about the minors.
So when I originally did the sketches, I really wanted it to be, before consciously bringing in the inner child, I wanted to make them seem like moments in daily life, and therefore an energy that is in movement the whole time. It's not something fixed. It's just something that is in the moment of happening. So an energy that is moving. And that's quite hard when you're drawing, to not make it suddenly seem like that's it, that's how it is, and forever, you know. So when I finished doing the drawings, that's when I said, okay, something really has to shake these up so that they even more seem just ephemeral and energy that is as life is, you know, just the whole time. You know, we tend to get this idea that our body is as it is, and that's it. It isn't, it's, you know, the cells are kind of spinning the whole time, and it's renewing and it's changing, and it's, and our emotions and everything is constantly in that movement. So that's when I said, okay, I need someone incredibly creative here that doesn't have fixed ideas about what paint is. Not, I mean, not, I don't have that fixed ideas, but still, you know, I thought, so I said to my 6-year-old, you go in, and I picked a specific dream actually where this magical place where everything is just has this beauty that I would never be able to reproduce. This is this sort of, and I said, you go in there, use those elements and do whatever you want. Now consider the amount of time I'd spent carefully and meticulously making each drawing. I said, you can scribble on them. You can just like, and I was horrified, like while I was doing it, because I could really feel this child working and doing whatever. You know, like if you have some beautiful paintings and this white wall and this really elegant house, and the 3-year-old comes in and starts to draw all over the walls, and you're going, ha, ha, ha. It was like that. I was watching it happen, and I was saying, you're destroying everything. I'm going to have to start again. But I just let it happen. You know, I was like, okay, I said, okay, fine, whatever. And she was making a total mess. And yet it was fascinating. It was completely strange and new and different. And it was bringing in the kind of life and the bits of energy that I'd been talking about, those bursts of movement and of. So then, of course, I left them for a while. I closed my studio, and I said, I'm pretending this hasn't happened for a few days, because I was just in shock. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to have to do now to make this look like anything. Because it was great, but it was a mess. In a way, it was like Temperance when she's working with all that color, and it's still just literally
Chaos.
Chaos, yeah. Then I came back, and very carefully from what she did, keeping it, I tried to bring it back. You know, I had to use some white again. I had to use a bit, but somehow again making shapes that could work visually, but keeping that pulse that she brought in. So.
And you know, this is so funny because from what I've heard, you know, some people hate the minors and they just want the whole deck to be like the majors. Yeah. And then a lot of my friends and like a lot of people I talk to sometimes even prefer the minors to the majors. And some people like me just love every fucking majors, minors, and the you know, and the chords. But it's interesting how, because it's such contrast to the majors, how that also kind of split the audience in kind of, you know, straight away going into like, oh, I don't like this one looked like she didn't put any work in, and I'm like, nah, it actually looks quite opposite to me. And from what you're saying, you know, that's like fascinating how you had to actually kind of, yeah, like put a little bit of structure onto this whole creative chaos, just like amazing chaos that came through. I personally find this, as you said, I think you reached your goal, like they alive. They very kind of, I love reading the little scribbles you did, and I can see also, you know, this astrology coming through and all of this kind of alchemy. It's amazing.
Experiments, you know, each one of those, again, it wants to look like a sketch that is the person working with the cards experimenting in their own experience of existence, because the whole thing is we are experimenting and shifting the whole time. So, you know, and all of it is part of us, and we're involved in that. So that was important to me. You know, there isn't some just truth that is out there and that's it, and I can either reach it or not, you know.
Yeah, it's this creative experimentation. And I think that's like really beautiful message also to wind up our interview with, because I also want to always kind of share it with people how to, you know, even when they use cards, when you do art, when you do whatever, like stay open, be creative, try to break few rules, you know, see how it goes for yourself, like, and don't be afraid to use the creativity, imagination. Like this is our strongest power, and it's so like this I don't know, dissociated. We so dissociated from. We think like imagination is just for children. Like, fuck, nothing in this world would happen if not for imagination, really. So this deck is amazing to work like this. And I think like also when we, you know, when I put it in a spread, when I use the whole deck, I think it works so well to like see these different realms come to life. And there's this different focus of the sometimes this black and white, or if you have more minors, you know, in the reading, it works so beautifully together. I'm just like very grateful that you made this happen, that you allowed this to, you know, sift through, and you were available and you didn't quit even when you wanted to. And I wanted to ask you to finish off maybe, do you use actually tarot for yourself? Like, do you work with cards every day, or if not every day, then?
It depends. There are moments where I might use them every day, and moments where I don't use them every day, and both are significant, you know. But yes, I definitely do work with them.
And do you work mostly with your deck, or do you have, I know you like the Mythic Tarot, but any other decks you kind of use now or like?
I do. Oh yeah. Lots of decks. I mean, I love some of Places decks. I love I forget what it's called. I forget some of the names. The Druid one.
The Druid Craft Tarot, or Wildwood Tarot.
The Druid, the Druid Craft.
Yeah.
I love Arnel Ando's Transformation deck.
How did you, sorry, Carmen, how did you even get together with, you know, Arnel Ando? Like, how did they publish your deck? Did they approach you, or did you know them? How did it happen?
You know, it's crazy. We actually met, you know, I mean, as much as I don't use social media very much, we met on Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw an image actually of Arnel's, her Temperance in her transformational deck with the snake skin, which is actually real snake skin, and the sunglasses and the amphora, and I was just mesmerized. So I commented. I knew nothing about her at the time, and through that, boom, everything opened.
Wow, that's awesome, because I love, you know, they print amazing decks, and
yes,
I love all of the Ellen Relenzi print decks. I have them all. I'm just fascinated with. They pick like artists that I always love. So whatever they make, I probably will like. So that's awesome. Okay, well, that was the question that just like impromptu jumped in. But thank you so much for joining in and for sharing so many amazing stories. A true bohemian, a true artist, and like I love that you have also this, you know, this love for creative thinking and for alchemy and for magic and for, you know, just living, living, like taking the elements and like fucking making stuff with them. That's really cool. And I'm so glad that you made this deck. So thank you so much for being my guest. I don't know if you have any last words for our audience. You want to bless us with some creative vibes, please?
No, I wanted to say actually how exhilarating it is to chat with you, and how fun this was, and how we need so much more of this, as you say, this creative talk, and this reminding just simply that we're bathed the whole time. You know, we were speaking of water, we are swimming the whole time in a real creative matrix that we tend to forget about, but in fact we're dreaming all the time. And the creativity, which is something that is true, it's not just, you know, the kind of fantasy that people might brush off as kind of just, you know,
I'm not creative,
whatever, you know, insignificance, is actually, these are actually incredible archetypal forces that shape our world and our religions and our everything, and we are part co-creators, and in that essence that we're part of the whole time. So, you know, our awe is important, and it can open at every moment. I think that, you know, whatever our situation is, just those eyes, boom, you know, again, those tens, those eyes just opening.
Yeah, and just answering the call.
Conditions like this, we can. Sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we just. I just had like the answering the call, you know, because sometimes people like have like, oh, I have this idea, but oh no, I'm not creative. I can't do it. No, I can't draw. I can't this. Like, oh no, but we can do so many different things.
We can do so many things, and in sharing like this, we, you know, again, we fire it up and give fuel to it. So thank you.
Thank you so much as well, Carmen. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will speak to you probably next year. I think we're going to close off the year, Carmen, with your amazing presence. So guys, have a wonderful break, holidays, Christmas, whatever you celebrate, and I will see you in 2020. Bye everyone, speak soon. Oops, wait, no. Stop recording.